Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by and welcome to the 2020 Project Orchids again. This is the final update for the plants selected for part 2, which were the Dendrobiums. They didn't all make it. One basically lost, since been replaced, but as it wasn't replaced with a selected orchid on an exact match, I haven't included it. But we may well include the replacement in next year's set. One particular plant has had various things going on, which I'll explain when we get there. But yeah, so this is the Dendrobiums final update for these 6 plants that were selected for 2020, and let's get going. Right, first up, my Dendrobium rhodosticktum, which is a Latoria type, and those of you who follow the channel know that all of my Latoria types had a real bad time in the previous year, with a heat wave basically, and the previous winter I lost a lot of roots because they stayed too wet in the cold temperatures. So what was left of this one went on a mount to see if I could get it to grow, and if I could, then obviously I'd have control of the root system in the following winter. This hadn't long been done at this point, and there were no signs of growth whatsoever. I had some green leaves and some leafless canes, but no real activity. The tiny little curved shoot on the right was an attempt at a new growth that just aborted. So that's how we sort of started the year with this one. Not looking good. A bit farther on in the year, we're into June now, we're into the growing season, we've got our warmth, we've got our long days, and what's happening with this plant? Absolutely nothing. It's still not attempting to grow. It would have some stored resources in the fact that it's got 4 swellings on 4 canes, and one of those canes has got 3 leaves and another cane has got 4. So there's a little bit of photosynthesis going on, but not a lot, and there are some stored resources, but it's doing nothing with them. This far into the growing season, I'd have expected something to be happening if it was going to. So this plant was not looking good. Nonetheless, one of my favourite Latoria blooms, so the plan was to persevere and give it as much of a chance as possible. See what happens. Right, well, by the time we got to here, we had what you could say is a result. Out to the left-hand side there, you can see a pretty good new cane growing. Not far off, basically going to open a leaf, but we have lost a leaf on one of the other canes, and the leaves on the far cane, the right hand side, the tallest one, were starting to yellow. So that was the sort of state of play. Not long after that, it dropped its green leaves and ended up with none, and that new growth actually aborted. So I was now left with a leafless plant, unable to feed itself, latest growth aborted, and just basically I gave up. No hope. So this one ceased to be after this point and has gone. So the Dendrobium lindleyi for me was quite a new plant. I got it towards the end of the previous year, 2019. So it had been through its first winter. It didn't get a full rest of any kind. It got the bright light and the lower temperatures, but I didn't stop watering completely. I kept it sort of ticking over. On the grounds, to me, it still looked like quite a young plant. So I wasn't making any effort to get it to bloom. I just wanted it to, survive the winter in a reasonable condition so that, during this coming growing season, it put on some good strong growths and some roots. So that was the plan for this. It was a healthy looking plant. What was there was good stuff. Nice bright green leaves, healthy bulbs. That slight shrivelling of the bulbs is what it's supposed to look like, so we didn't worry about that. So yeah, looking good. Now coming into this time of year, we had spikes. Totally out of the blue, this plant decided to bloom. Very, very unexpected. I thought it was a young plant, and it started pushing out quite a few spikes in their infancy here, so there's not a lot to see, but you can see one down at the bottom out to the right. But yes, we had spikes starting. Not a lot of new growth as far as expanding the plant size was concerned, but nonetheless some. But yeah, the extraordinary thing was the actual blooming, which, you know, as I said, that was unexpected to say the least. It's a pity the blooming didn't coincide with one of these stages, but that's how they go, you know, and they're not long-lived lindleyi blooms. Quite a spectacle, but, you know, they don't last too long, like quite a lot of dendrobiums. So by the time we got out towards the end of the growing season, the new growths had matured okay. There weren't as many as I was expecting, and somebody suggested that I might get a second flush as we sort of get into autumn that might continue to grow through the winter. Well, it didn't happen. This was the size of the plant at the end of the my first growing season, and it had grown some new bulbs. So although it wasn't that many, I was pleased with the fact that we had new growths, because quite honestly, I'm not sure whether it blooms on 2-year-old canes or 1-year-old canes. So at this particular point in time, it's still in its growing season, it's still getting watered and it's still getting fed. Bulbs are still maturing, leaves have still got a little bit of growing left to do. So it's not anywhere near going into a rest period in September, but coming soon. So this one, Dendrobium lindleyi, is well, I consider it to be a winter rester, but that doesn't mean it doesn't get any water. Not in my book. You know my opinions on this nonsense of no watering from end of October till middle of February or something daft. I'm sure I'd have some dead plants if I attempted to do that. But anyway, this one is in its rest period. What that means from my point of view is my mounts are getting watered at the moment every 3rd or 4th day, yeah, and occasionally they get a little bit of feed thrown in for those that are not resting. Yeah, so this one misses a turn. So this one's going about 7 to 8 days in between getting looked at. And when I look at it, it gets a trickle of water. It doesn't get the soaking like it gets in the growing season. So I would just pour some water sort of around the edges and onto the edge of the moss and onto those roots underneath. And that's all it would get. So it wouldn't get a soaking, it would get a trickle. And the whole idea of that is to just stop it shriveling too much and losing all its energy. These are the sort of new growths. You can see they're very, very large fat growths at the moment, bigger than, I forget which ones it is. I think it's this one, and this one are this year's, and there's another one, possibly this one down here. But they're bigger than anything else on the plant. What I don't know is if I'm going to get any blooms anywhere else on the plant, or whether it exhausted those at the beginning of this year when it bloomed unexpectedly. So that I don't know. But we should get some blooms on the latest growths, I would think, possibly some on the older ones. Let's wait and find out, basically. Get it through the winter rest, you know, bringing it back into bloom. I think it comes into growth before it comes into bloom, this one. It's not a late winter bloomer. It's more into spring, heading towards summer, this one. Or it was last year, anyway. Anyway, it's done well this year. I'm pleased with it. Put out a good root system on top of what it already had. And, yeah, currently having a rest. As far as this nobly type is concerned, I got this at Burnham's in mid-season in full bloom previous year, so 2019. and one of the new growths on it was broken, which Sarah did point out to me. She said, "Oh, if you're going to have that one, there's a broken new growth." I said, "Yes, not to worry, it's got two others." 2 out of 3 is not bad, we'll put up with that. And basically it bloomed out of season, obviously, midsummer, and those 2 new growths that I came home with in midsummer carried on growing right through the winter. So as we came out into the start of the growing season, those 2 canes had matured during the winter, got their terminal leaf, but had not bloomed. Yeah, so those are the 2 canes out to the left hand side with full sets of leaves. So they're new but unbloomed at this time of year. Now, as we got later into the season, obviously those 2 mature canes that I'd grown on through the winter didn't do anything. They're still sat there. There's a theory they might have actually come into bloom in midsummer, because the plant will most likely be out of season. But what I was pleased about was new growths coming out. Now, one's round the back and one's out to the right hand side. So there's 2 canes that are about half the height of the plant at this point. The one on the right that we can actually see was the larger of the 2. So it had come into growth in the middle of the season. That type of growth should start in March, April time, not in June. But they were growing fast and growing strong, and the plant had produced a hell of a root system by now. Difficult to see through that opaque pot, but nonetheless a good strong root system in a pot that looked a little large for a nobile type, but it's a tall plant and it's heavy. So by the time we got to the end of the growing season, my 2 new canes, the one out to the right hand side, is now a reasonable bit longer than anything else on the plant. So for once I've grown a cane taller than the ones that I bought it with that were in full bloom, because often your canes are inferior to the nursery grown ones. So I've grown a nice cane. The other new growth is pushing on as well, but not quite as tall. So it sits around the back out of sight. But a good strong new cane. Now, we've had our growing season. There's still a bit more growing to do on the 2 latest growths, but what we'll be doing is going into winter with 2 growths that matured the previous winter into spring that haven't bloomed, and 2 growths that have grown properly at the right time of year, which, given a bit of a rest through the winter, should bloom. So we don't know what this is going to do. Okay, a biggie this time. Unexpected happenings on this one, although could have been partially predicted. As I've said, these 2 canes are last year's canes that started in the middle of the season and grew on through the winter and matured early this year, basically. Now these are coming into bud, so we've got buds on these 2 canes. Given that the plant was out of season when I got it, that's not completely unexpected. But what I'm more interested in finding out what's going to happen with these 2. These are my 2 canes for this year, and you can see they've grown quite a bit taller than anything else on the plant, and finished growing now, and no sign of any buds on these. So I've got a feeling what we're going to get as the winter progresses, these are going to come into bloom in a natural course of events. That's probably going to be after Christmas by the time they develop and open, but still in winter time we're going to get some blooms. And then I suspect these 2 canes will behave a bit more normally and they'll start to get their buds in late winter, but they might not, because the plant was out of season last year quite badly. It's in bloom in August. These 2 might bloom late, so they might go on into sort of late spring and possibly even into summer before they bloom. But they will bloom next year, and these will be in bloom very early next year. Obviously the 4 canes are not going to be in bloom at the same time. No, that's not going to happen. So anyway, yeah, pleased with the progress on that, and it's got a lovely pot full of roots, which you can see through the opaque pot, and currently it's actually producing some new roots off of this year's canes. So it's adding to what it already had. So I'm quite pleased with this plant. Spur of the moment purchase at Burnham's on the grounds that I'd been there for the day and I hadn't bought anything, and I thought, well, what can I take home? I can't leave without buying anything. For me, that would be rude, you know, in a nursery where I know the owner and have done for years. So I just grabbed this. It was the genuine article. Pretty blooms, must have, I suppose. Anyway, that's that one. Now, this giant Dendrobium chryseum has yet to bloom. It's put on a phenomenal amount of growth. The original canes are the ones pointing downwards that are leafless and were actually chopped because they got in the way. That may have had an effect on the plant, but nonetheless it grew a lot of growth the previous year, some of which was starting to arch over because it carries on growing through the winter. It doesn't stop. It's a bit like Hercoglossum on that front. But nonetheless, a plant that takes up that much space and needs some looking after because of the water it drinks needs to bloom to justify its space. So the expectation from this, it's had a winter, on growths grown the year before, and it's come out of that winter into a growing season. I would expect at some point during this year to see some buds and some blooms. So that's the anticipation. Well, we got to June and we still haven't had any. Ratty thing. This one's beginning to become an annoyance because it's just so big and clumsy to handle. Knocks things over when I'm getting it down to watering. But nonetheless, the previous year's growths that grew on through the winter are now starting to arch over quite nicely and forming quite a lower down bush. And in addition to that, it looks like it's going to double in size. The amount of new growths on this is absolutely phenomenal. So green stuff aplenty, buds not a light. I did a bit of reading on it, and where it comes from, it gets pretty flipping cold in the winter. So if we don't see any blooms during this current growing season on those, previous year canes, then this is going to get some pretty cold treatment this coming winter, somehow or other. We have to put it outside in the yard and just bring it in when it's really bad. So end of season then, no buds, lots of growth. Growths are starting to get longer and longer. As far as growing the plant is concerned, I must be doing everything right because it really is getting big. It's a massive plant. These canes are heading up to 2 foot long, and you can't count them. There's too many. It's just absolutely vast. It's generated a hell of a root system during this growing season. So quite honestly, it's going into winter with no excuse whatsoever. But what I'm going to do in the winter, come the end of winter, January into February, it's going to go outside quite a bit. When the days are cool but not wet, and come back in again, for the nights in case we get a frost or anything. But I'm going to drop this right down temperature wise and see what happens. Now this monster is it's getting half rested, so it is getting the same treatment as the lindleyi was the last one I sort of looked at that's a true rester, because I'm not sure whether this is a true rester firstly, and secondly there are canes that are still growing. So what I do is I miss out a watering turn, but when it comes to the turn when it's going to get some water, it actually gets a good soak because it is actively growing in places. But it's also due in autumn. I've just picked up loads of leaves off of this one that it's dropped. So in a way, dropping leaves may be the best sign yet as regards potential blooming, because if it blooms on the deciduous canes, the canes that have lost their leaves, the first thing that needs to happen is it needs to have some. And at the moment it hasn't. Just these few down here are the ones that potentially could bloom, and they are losing their leaves, so they're going to be leafless soon. This lot up here won't be. This is mostly this year's growth and a bit of last year's that hasn't arched over yet. So we'll have to wait and see, but I'm going to give this this is going to get the cold shoulder come sort of January time, get out into next year, and it's going to spend some of its life outside where it really does chill down. It'll be protected, it won't get rained on or anything like that, because we can get you can get a day outside where the temperature's reasonable, but the rain is like down near zero. Because of the height that it's coming down from. So it'll be protected, it won't get rained on, and I'll keep my eye on sort of temperatures, and if it looks like it's heading down too low, then it can come in again and go back out again in sort of milder periods, where the temperatures are going to be quite a bit lower than in here. Because during the day in here, I'm bumping up to 20 degrees. We won't get 20 degrees outside, not in our winter. A lot of the time it will be closer to sort of 10, possibly even lower. But where this is found, it does get very cool temperatures, down as low as 5. So it's obviously tolerant of low temperatures, and it might be the trigger that it needs to get some blooms. So that's that monster. And quite honestly, this is its last chance for blooming as far as I'm concerned, otherwise somebody else is going to have a go. I've had it some time now. It grows well, can't say it doesn't grow well. It's got a good root system now, and we do have some canes that are becoming deciduous. So it's got everything on it that it should need to form some buds. So out into next year, it needs to get on and do it. Right, now we'll have some fun. This tiny little Victoria regina was given to me as a gift with just effectively like one cane and a little new growth coming out at the top. And I think I had 1 or 2 roots, but certainly not a lot. Nonetheless, the plant was alive, it was, and was capable of being grown on. But I would suggest quite a few years away from blooming. It's a very young plant. But I decided to mount it, and I mounted it upside down. You can grow this one upright if you choose to, and it will grow successfully in a pot as long as it's got the open, fast drainage type media. But it doesn't need a big pot. If it goes in a pot, it'll grow in a tiny one or a little basket. But I decided to mount it. I put it that way up, and at this particular point, all I had was this tiny little new growth to look at and water. Right, by the time we got to here, our little new growth was pushing on. I was quite pleased. There certainly wasn't a huge amount of root growth, but we had a growth pushing on, still in active growth. But because it was so far off blooming, I saw another Victoria regina for sale that actually looked like quite a good plant. It was a good size. So basically I bought it as a friend for this one. So unusual in the project plants, I'm effectively introducing a second plant of the same type part way through the year. Yeah? So as I said, it's unusual. So where we started with a single plant, we've still got it, it's not gone away, but it's now got a friend to accompany it. So I'll film that separately as a separate plant, but still in this same, I'll call it a group of 2. So this was the new plant I bought. I must admit, for a Victoria regina, the canes looked a little long, but it was a good healthy plant. It had some leaved canes, some leafless canes, and was perfectly capable of blooming. Again, I mounted it and I decided to put it upside down. Quite a large plant. If I'd mounted it upright, it would have been clumsy and waggled around all over the place. I wouldn't have been able to support the canes. If it had gone in a pot, I could have staked the canes and had a nice upright plant, which is what a lot of people do with this particular dendrobium. It'll lend itself to growing either way and do quite well either way. The plant doesn't seem to really have a preference, but if you put it in an open basket or something, the canes will arch over. It won't naturally grow bolt upright. They will arch over and become semi-pendulous. So we've now got two plants. And we've still got two plants, but they're not the same two, because the nice new plant that I bought decided to bloom. And I've never seen a Victoria regina that's pink, so I was sold a duff, a hybrid basically. Complained to the seller, who promptly said if I send it back, he will gladly give me my money back, because obviously his supplier was at fault and had actually given him something that, you know, was mislabeled. So eventually I got another replacement that is the real thing, because it came direct from Burnham's off of one of the specimen plants via Sarah. She handed it to me personally. So I've got no qualms about knowing that this is the real thing. Our little plant, which goes alongside it, is still growing on. That little new growth is still growing. It's actually starting to arch over now. So we've now got two plants, a mature one and a young one to grow on. So quite unusual happenings as far as project orchids are concerned with the Dendrobium Victoria regina, on the grounds that one of them wasn't. But all along that shenanigans that was going on, our little one was growing on and is still growing. It still hasn't finished. So it's extending into a cane that's now as long as the cane it already had. So it's growing on quite nicely. The Victoria regina that I got from Burnham's, the real thing, is just possibly starting to go over now, I'm not sure. But we got it to bloom, so we've now had the blooms here. And it's currently pushing out a lot of new roots. So we've got quite a few new roots in here, and some of them are right down in the pot as well. So it's generating a root system. It's still at it, hasn't finished yet. And we have a new cane starting. Now that looks quite small and weak, but who knows? You know, I mean, I haven't had the real thing here in a plant this size before, so that's possibly exactly what the cane should look like when it's new. But there's no sign of any more buds coming on top of what we've already got at the moment. This is a much newer cane here and still has its full set of leaves. That's probably going to bloom next year, possibly along with that one towards the end of the year. I don't really know. And we could get some more buds form on these older leafless canes. Koniko that I've got blooms many, many times on the same canes, and that's half Victoria regina anyway. So, you know, that one has that trait of actually blooming more than once on a cane once it becomes leafless. So, yeah, pleased that I've now got the real thing. Pleased that it's growing roots. I think it's probably going to stay in the pot. Lots of people thought I would mount it. I'm probably going to leave it in the pot, because by the time we get round to next year, these roots will have settled into this bark, and I'm happy that the bark that Sarah uses is good quality. So it can stay in there for at least next year. Now, it'll be fine. Pot's a bit big, I must admit, but it is heavily cropped with polystyrene in the bottom, so it's not deep. Anyway, that's that one, and our little cane is growing on. Who knows, we may get a new growth on there at some time down the line. I suspect, as far as this young plant is concerned, this cane probably needs to get a terminal leaf before another new growth starts. Can't guarantee that, that's a complete guess, based on other dendrobiums that I've had in similar situations. So pleased with this, pleased with the cane on the little one growing on. Pleased that I got the real thing from Sarah, and ultra pleased that it actually bloomed. Good stuff. And the last one is the Dendrobium Angel. This is a Phalaenopsis type, and I'd recently split the plant. This particular division was chosen to go in, in the project orchids. What I had here was two leaved canes, one with a good set of leaves on that had bloomed for me, and the other one I think may have actually bloomed as well quite a while ago, and we had a tiny little new growth showing at the bottom and a very poor root system. So that was the sort of state of play, you know, at the start of the growing season in March. But given that these like to stay warm, they don't like the highest of lights, but they do like to stay warm, and when they're actively growing they will drink, but they hate soggy roots and cool temperatures. So it was in a large bark mix in a relatively small pot. So that's where we started. Getting into June now, and our new growth is pushing on quite nicely and has started some new roots, which is good because there really weren't many. Basically the plant was wobbling, so it got, the stakes got adjusted to make sure it stays still, to make sure that those nice new roots on the new growth don't get broken by waggling around in large chunky bark. It's quite easy to do. If your plant moves and a root is sort of wedged between two pieces of bark, it can easily snap. So it's better that your plant remains absolutely still until the roots get a hold. So yeah, this one was coming on. I was quite pleased with its progress. It was doing what was expected of it, really. An extra new growth would have been nice, but on a 2-cane plant, a third new cane that's growing nice and strong with roots is good stuff. So I was pleased with the progress at this point. And then coming up to the end of the season, our new growth matured and decided to spike. Isn't that nice? The plants, when they were joined together before it was separated into two pieces, did actually bloom the previous winter. Not a bad spike. This one looks like quite a good spike. It's pushed away from the cane, so it's got some length to it, and the buds were starting to swell and show their colour, so not too far off blooming if the buds don't blast. You can get a cold snap that'll blast buds on these. If it's been used to good temperatures and not too cold at night, and you get a cold night without a heater, you can turn up in the morning and all your buds have gone brown. They don't like to chill down, basically, especially like a sudden change. So at the moment, good progress for its first year in its new pot as a division. And there we go then, ending on the Phalaenopsis type, Thai Angel. Last time we looked at it, we had a spike forming with buds looking okay. That's gone on to bloom very nicely. Good set of blooms, very pleased, and they are lasting a long time. This has been open for some time now, so well pleased with that. And I thought this time I'd get it out of its black pot to show you how poor the root system is. That's about it. Yeah, and because it hasn't grown a new cane since this one started, it also hasn't pushed out any new roots yet. So this is not a good root system on this plant. I suspect magic will happen when this spike finishes, because not long after that it's going to trigger yet another new growth, and hopefully that's the one that will get the bottom end of the plant catching up with the top end and get a decent root system on it. But I'm not that keen on the Phalaenopsis type Dendrobiums, but I keep this one because I really do like the blooms. I like the tessellation on the petals. Just makes it a little bit unusual. It's a good balanced shaped bloom, and it's got some lovely little sticky up bits right in the middle of the lip. So I like these blooms. That's probably the only reason it stays. As I say, I'm not too keen on the Phalaenopsis type. I can't say why. I just, I just find them a little boring in the Dendrobium field anyway. So there we go. That's that one done. So that was part 2 of the Dendrobiums. Hope you enjoyed that. Parts 3 and 4 will follow over the next few days, weather depending. I can't film when it's chucking it down with rain because the noise is just far too great. I can't cope with it. So hopefully we will get suitable filming weather for me to actually get the next 2 parts done. And then Then we will have a delay and we will select some new plants once we get out into the new year and have a chat about those. And who knows, you might have a bit of a say in the selection. Depends how generous I'm feeling. See you next time. Bye for now.